traders, so welcome to the Shark Trading Academy's weekly market analysis, and for today I'll dive straight into the dollar index. And over here you can see that we are able to project some buyers where prices are currently at a demand zone. So what we can expect from here would be a bounce into this supply or this supply zone before tapping into these lower prices over here. So this is actually a demand zone as well. So what are we expecting from these levels? Right, with a bounce from this level, it means that you are able to look for strong dollar movements. All right, and then over here we have weak dollar movement, right, because we are at a supply zone over here. So whether or not prices decides to hold from here, we'll wait for the evidence such that we want to see a breakdown over here. Then we expect prices to actually make a move down towards this demand level. So this demand level can be refined into this area over here, right? And you realize that this entire range of demand is really huge. If you can move down to the monthly time frame, you understand that we are playing in a range of a monthly demand zone. All right, so look for areas to buy from. So with this, we can project the biases for the other dollar pairs. Over here, we have the Aussie dollar, and you can see that we are currently on a weekly demand area. So this means that we are looking for higher prices to be met, maybe over here, right? And this is because we have a breakout structure here, leaving us an uptrend move from here. And now tap into our demand area. So to confirm that you want to be a buyer, you could have already bought here, right? And the thing now is that we have a supply zone that is valid as well, because over here we broke out of structure and you could have been a seller anytime now, because on a lower time frame you are able to wait for prices to make a move down. If you were to view this on a daily time frame, you understand that we are still in a bearish movement. Over here you can see that we are on a downtrend, right? So this is a downtrend movement, and this means that prices are able to move like this for lower prices to be met. And that's why we don't want to make any assumption now and simply wait for a break of this supply area. So if we were to see a breakout, we can actually look for demand areas inside of these levels on the daily time frame and take buys off here to higher prices. And this would be a cleaner trade idea. Of course, take profits at previous supply areas. Otherwise, aim for liquidity highs over here. Next up, we have the Bitcoin, and we identified a supply area here and liquidity highs here as well. So now prices makes a break of structure here, leaving behind demand areas for us to get involved. So we expect prices to move towards this level before liquidating highs by means of this area as well as this area before tapping into our supply zone. And this is where you want to liquidate some of your Bitcoin positions, because you understand that we have a major break of structures over here. And this may actually make a move down lower. Not saying that it will, but we have a potential move towards these areas over here, right? And of course, if prices breaks this level by means of a bearish movement, then of course this would bring prices lower towards perhaps one of the areas inside of here, right? So we will not project this far just yet, but understand that this may be a possibility. So right now, we do expect some bullish movement for Bitcoin at the very least, as prices steps into any of these demand areas to push towards supply zones over here. So looking at the Euro New Zealand dollar, we have a demand area here, and immediately we can see a supply area here as well. So with this breakout structure, we expect prices to move into this supply, give us some sort of a distribution on the lower time frame to push prices lower into this demand area, then perhaps accumulate over here by means of structural shift as well as manipulation. Then this breakout may break this level because we are on a higher demand area. Okay, we have a breakout structure here. So this was an institutional move, right? We have a breakout structure lower and then a breakout. So typically you are seeing a movement like this, the sell into the buy, right? That broke out of structure here. So with this, we expect prices to move higher into these liquidity areas here. Okay, and that is why at the moment we still have a range for prices to go lower, and that is why you want to sell high, right? You don't want to sell here because you are in the middle of the range. Okay, this sell side move, with this sell you are selling low, right? And that's why you want to sell higher. You want to wait for prices to move into this supply area where the buy to sell move happen, and that is why from here you are able to take a good sell with good risk to reward, pushing prices towards this area, and then decide whether you're going to be a buyer here, because if you do not see any shift in structure, means that prices are going to continue lower, because this is still a bearish movement. We expect bearish movement as prices taps into this level, and this bearish movement will not change until it tells you it wants to, right? You want to see a shift in structure, a break of structure for prices to move higher. So do we immediately aim for highs over here? We do not, right? We wait for prices to move into this supply and then see whether we can catch another move into demand areas over here. Then a secondary move higher to liquidate positions here and eventually over here. So next up we have the Euro Pound, and you can see how we actually caught a sell move on Friday. So this was the take profit area, and we met targets for 1:2.3 trade. So how did we actually come across this trade, right? First, it started off with a supply zone, and on the lower time frame, you can already imagine that we have a buy that liquidates trend lines and resistance areas before the sell move, and this is why prices will come back to mitigate these areas over here, because the institutional traders sold heavily, they bought heavily here to push prices higher, to liquidate all of these levels before selling, and prices now comes back to mitigate their losing positions, right, before the sell-off. So on the lower time frame, you can see that we have like a sideways movement waiting for either side to break out, right? This is the sideways movement that we are talking about. And now prices breaks out of this resistance area where most retail traders are looking at, right? So over here we have a trend line breakout as well as a resistance area breakout, and this makes it really strong in the terms of retail trading mindset or logic. So this break of structure over here make traders believe that it's gonna retest this area for a buyout, and that's why many traders are waiting to get involved at this resistance and trend line area, right? And then maybe on the lower time frame, on the 5 minutes time frame or even lower, we see a retest and pin bar. So traders are likely to buy here and stop loss below the swing low, looking for 1:2 or 1:3 trade, right? And over here, as prices buy up, it sold heavily downwards, okay? And this is where retail traders get trapped. So moving back to our 15 minutes time frame, you understand that we have this buyout area over here. So it triggers buy stops as well, alright? So there are many participants over here before the sell-off. And that is why on the 1 hour time frame, on a high time frame, we expect this buy to sell to be mitigated over here. So what were we looking for at this point of interest, right? Because we are now at the supply zone. So any of these areas are sell zones, right? On the 30 minutes time frame, again, we have the first hand movement, such that as prices taps into our supply area, we saw a pin bar. So the truth is that traders are already getting involved over here, right? We have the sell, stop loss above this level, and maybe you target for 1:1 or lows over here. And then you can see that prices failed to make lows and makes a secondary move higher, and that is why traders are getting trapped over here as well. So we only want to get involved after we see the shift in structure, and over here we do not see any shift in structure. This is just a candlestick bullish bearish pattern, right? This is just a bearish pin bar, and for us we want to see the transfer of weak hands into strong hands. Over here we have strong bullish movement, and prices are easily going to come back here for a higher movement, and this didn't give us enough range to catch a sell just yet. So once prices breaks this high, can you see that the bullish move is slowing down? Then we have a strong sell side that broke out of structure, leaving behind supply areas here, and this is how we get involved in this sell move. So can you see the difference between selling here with this bullish impulse still in play versus this weak bullish area, this weak bullish move, and this was a clear transfer of weak hands into strong hands. This is a strong sell with momentum in our favor, and that is why we can catch sells into supply areas over here. So moving forward with the euro pound, what can we expect now? We have a supply area here that is valid and a demand area over here that is valid because this supply broke out of structure over here, right? And this demand broke out of structure over here. So we can either expect a move down into this demand zone to accumulate, give us the shape and structure that we're looking for, a test back into demand areas over here before a move higher into this supply zone. And then over here, we have to look for a distribution because overall we have a bearish move, right? We are still making lower lows over here. Lower lows, and lower lows. So we expect prices to move into these supply, these demand areas, right? And in terms of liquidity lows. So over here, we're going to see a distribution. A buy up into these areas, liquidating trend lines, trapping retail traders, and then a sell move before a test back into supply zones. And this should bring us lower. And of course, we do not aim for liquidity lows over here, but we're going to see what prices do. Okay. Along the way, you may have met some kind of a demand areas maybe inside of here. And this should give us an accumulation higher into supply zones for a bearish continuation. So this is just one of the possibilities. Otherwise, we can expect the opposite movement where prices comes back into this supply zone first. So now we expect prices to move into our demand area. Then with this, buy up into a supply before continue lower. We can expect a buy up first, a distribution into demand areas to accumulate, to move back into supply zones before distributing again for lower prices to be met. So whichever that comes first, wait for the confirmation and the shift of hands, right? Before taking the trade. So next up for euro dollar, this is pretty clean. I'm just waiting for prices to move back into this demand area. On the higher time frame, right? This is the 4-hour time frame. We expect prices to move back into demand levels here. So preferably after a break of structure here, wait for prices to come back to this area, wait for the shift in structure or by any means of confirmation that you have learned so far, right? To liquidate highs here. So we assume that if prices turns from here, this would be your liquidity highs. If prices makes a move higher, then this would be your liquidity high. So whichever high that it made before the pullback, right? So assuming it moves into these areas, wait for accumulation and reconfirmation before pushing prices towards liquidity highs and eventually these areas as well. So next up, we have the pound dollar, and this is a very clean move. You can see a sell move into these areas, right? And now breaks out of structure over here. So again, we have this sideways movement, the breakdown, the strong sell, then the breakout, right? So this left behind a demand area that we were looking for, and you could have already been a participant over here. Okay, and over here we see the same movement. So this movement can be seen over here, right? This is just a smaller version of it, or maybe can be found on the lower time frame. This is the sideways movement, the sell before the buyout. And this is the same thing. Over here on the 1-hour time frame, we have this sideways movement. We have the buy to sell, trapping retail traders over here before the buyout again. And this means that I am looking for a pullback before higher movements, because you can see that this is a liquidity high that we are going to meet. And likely prices are going to push higher from now. Okay, prices have a higher tendency to move into these liquidity highs. So with this, we expect prices to break out of this level, pull back into maybe demand zones here before moving higher into liquidity highs over here. Otherwise, simply aim for the supply zone here. So this would be the trade idea for pound dollar. So over here, we have the New Zealand dollar, and you can see that we have a break of structure here. and now prices broke out of this area. So this means that I can expect a short-term buy over here, or maybe lower over here, right? So these two are the areas that I'm looking for buys. But you can see that this demand area left behind a trendline liquidity where prices are likely to maybe accumulate, give you a false break into lower areas over here to grab the liquidity areas inside of here, right? So now prices are at a supply area as well. So you want to look for confirmations to take prices lower into this zone, perhaps liquidating these areas over here, accumulate to go higher, right? But you understand that on the higher time frame, we are on a bearish order flow. So this supply may just take us lower into liquidity lows over here. So the truth is that there are so many ways you can trade this pair right now, and you want to wait for confirmations. So the truth is, wait for a break of this level, then take the demand zones here to aim for liquidity highs. So if prices decided to move down from here, this demand area may not hold because this will be seen as a liquidity pool, right? And this move may liquidate supply areas along the way down to push prices even lower. And then this will continue the bearish movement down. So if you go down to the higher time frame, you know that we have lower areas to be met by means of this area. So if you want to be a buyer on New Zealand dollar, I want to buy on the weekly time frame over here because this is a clean demand zone, right? And this supply area has been mitigated as well. So lastly, for the dollar yen, you can see that prices indeed came up to liquidate the equal highs, right? And left behind a supply zone here. So if I want to be a seller, I only want to sell here, because this may be seen as a supply area, but prices are likely to liquidate this level, moving higher to distribute before tapping into liquidity lows over here. So this can be traded as well. This demand area over here can be traded because it broke out of structure. This demand zone broke out of structure here. So as prices moves its way down, we expect accumulation over here and some sort of a bias to push prices higher into supply areas before potentially moving down, right? And that's why you do not aim for liquidity lows immediately. You see what prices want to do over here. And now, on a short-term basis, we expect prices to move higher into supply areas, right? Then expect distribution to take us lower.